Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy. What's today's?
So our win is August 19th, 1982. Our where is Cincinnati, Ohio. Our son bitch this week is David Steffen. He was born December 22nd, 1959. And your trigger in this case is that I promise you won't see the twist coming. So don't try to guess it, fucker.
I sure will guess.
Our son bitch, David, he had a shitty childhood, much like all of our other criminals we've talked about. He suffered from extensive and often brutal discipline at the hands of his stepfather.
What happened to his real pa?
I don't know. It don't matter. He's not in the picture.
Was he never in the picture?
I have no idea.
Maybe he was dead or ran away, and then he was raised by his stepdad, like from as early as you can go back.
So we can go back and talk about his childhood after I'm done with this case, if you'd like. We can put that at the end if you so desire to discuss it. But it is not important. I don't know. I don't have the details.
You brought it up.
I'm just giving you the background that I do have on the man. Okay?
I'm just curious when the beating started.
He was young. So his stepfather acted as if David could do nothing right. And the sadistic discipline from his stepfather would lead David to frequently run away from whatever home he was living in, because later in his childhood, he would be sent away to Catholic school for troubled children. When he was at the Catholic school, he did become involved in a church youth group, and he did develop normal relationships with women, and he was very protective of his sister. He does have a sister, and he does have a brother. Where they fall in line, like age-wise, I'm not certain. David's living at the Catholic school, but he would frequently run away.
When did he live at a Catholic school?
Dude, don't ask the stupid questions. He was a child. His family shipped him off because he was a bad boy.
You didn't say that shit.
I sure fucking did. I said from the sadistic discipline from David's stepfather, it would lead David. That's when he would frequently run away from wherever he was placed, because at one point in his childhood, he got sent away to a Catholic school for troubled children, and he became involved in the youth groups at the church. He would also begin committing petty crimes, and as he got older, he began to escalate to more serious offenses, such as burglary. Now, there are other children in the house. Like I said before, he has a brother and a sister. I'm not sure how many kids they are, and I'm not sure if they're step siblings or half siblings or full. I don't know. They're raised in the same household, and the other children in this household all grew up to become well-adjusted, stable adults. Yes, they had a abusive childhood as well. However, David did not bounce back. He was not as resilient as the other children.
I'm going to say they were half siblings because his dad had disappeared. So if he was being beaten by his stepfather, I would say something happened there. Mom moved on. Now he's got half siblings.
That's the way I took it as well.
And that he was probably beaten. He probably did start being bad later on, but I'm going to say the beating started because the stepdad resented his existence because he ruined the whole family picture.
I completely agree.
Then he started being bad and acting out because he's angry at life. So that's what children do.
Exactly. And David's brother goes on record later and says that he believes that David craved attention, just like with little kids, that even if it's negative attention, it's still attention. And there was no limits to what he was willing to do for attention, which I think is sad. Now we're going to fast forward. David's 22 years old. He was on probation for an Indiana bank robbery, and he got a job working as a door-to-door salesman for a household cleaning product called High Pro. David was strolling through a Cincinnati neighborhood when he saw a young woman outside. He approached her, originally wanting to demonstrate the products he was trying to sell. The young woman was a 19-year-old girl named Karen Range. She wanted to be a veterinarian, and she was engaged to her boyfriend, James Schreider. James and Karen had gone out the day before and picked out their wedding rings, and she had just hopped in the shower, and her hair was freshly washed, still wet, and she went out to the front yard. Not sure what she was doing out in the front yard, but she ran out. Maybe she's getting a newspaper, who knows. But she goes out in the front yard when the salesman approaches her. She was the only one at home that afternoon, in the home that she shared with her parents, and David demonstrated the product to her on several spots on the front porch and on the doorbell, and Karen then allowed David to enter the home, and it was all seemingly innocent. David further demonstrated the product in the living room, and then he and Karen proceeded to go into the bathroom down the hall. Karen watched as David sprayed some High Pro on the back base of the toilet, and as he and Karen both stood back up, he rubbed his face on Karen's breasts, and she began to scream at him to get the fuck out.
He was getting all sweaty showing the demonstration, and he just needed to get the sweat out of his eyeballs.
That's disgusting. But in an attempt to stop her from screaming, he took that there dirty cleaning rag that he just wiped on the toilet and shoved it in her mouth.
Oh,
which
oh. I don't know if I'd want to live through this or not.
So David, because again, she just got a dirty rag shoved in her mouth.
That would not make me stop screaming. It'd be
right, and that's exactly what happened. So David began hitting Karen repeatedly and beating her, and she continued to scream and thrash about and try to get away from him. But again, they're in a small bathroom. There's only so much space.
Come to think of it, even if I wasn't screaming before, you stuff a dirty toilet rag in my mouth, the screaming just began.
Right? I agree. So David then grabbed Karen, ripped her shirt off, and knocked her to the floor. David decided at this point he wanted to rape Karen. In a fit of rage after ripping her clothes off, he stomped on Karen's chest 3 separate times. I'm guessing that she was unconscious at this point.
I have a question.
But he
Don't. Does he have a history of, like, I assume this wasn't his first house. Did he sleep with people prior? So that was his, like, go-to move? And not, like, this is the first person to try this on that started screaming?
So, honestly, I don't know how long he worked for High Pro. So I don't know if he had a history of sleeping with, like, some stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home wives that were just lonely. Or if maybe because they were close in age that he thought he might get somewhere with her. I have no idea.
I'm going to say that's how it happened.
So David stomped on Karen's chest, and then he scurried off to the kitchen and grabbed a paring knife. He came back and cut her throat 3 times. He nearly decapitated the terrified teen on the bathroom floor.
How old is she?
She was 19. And then David grabbed the High Pro bottle and ran out of the house. He took off his bloody shirt and tossed it in some bushes. He came up with a lie because I don't know if you know much about how the door-to-door sales stuff used to work, but it was like everybody piled in a van. They got dropped off at the end of one street, and then the van drove to the other, and you guys went door to door and then met back at the van. Now, this whole murdering thing took a little bit longer, so he was going to have to tell his boss, hey,
and where
this is
did
what
your
happened.
shirt go? Why are you heavy breathing and your hair's all jacked up?
Right. So David, being the genius that he is, comes up with a lie for his boss that he was robbed. He even called the police and filed a police report saying they done stole his shirt and that High Pro stuff. Something important to note, though, they never find his shirt, but they do find the High Pro bottle.
I bet something made off with it.
His bloody shirt?
Yeah, like an animal.
Oh, probably. Now, Karen's mother returns home not long after Karen had been attacked to find her daughter unclothed, battered, and bloodied, and dead on the bathroom floor.
And you know what? I hate to say it, but as stupid as his excuse was, he says he was robbed and was all heavy breathing and everything. I don't feel like people would think that he just murdered somebody who was trying to sell a cleaner to. So it makes it easier for him to try to blame somebody robbing him.
Right.
And that person did the murdering.
Right. So just hold your panties because I'm going to make you kind of chuckle and roll your eyes because he did have a good excuse. And then the next day, David was picked up for questioning by the Cincinnati police regarding his robbery that he reported in the vicinity of the murder of Karen. And at first, David was like, "No, I don't know anything about a murder." And then he's like, "You know what? Come to think of it, I was present during the murder, but I
Oh my
didn't do the
God.
murdering." He's like, "I
You
was
know,
down on the living room
I
floor."
frequently forget when I see somebody murdered. Turns
He's
out
like,
it was a real pricey shirt and it overshadowed the murdering.
it gets even better. And by better, I mean worse. He said that he witnessed Karen's murder and that it was his adopted step twin brother, who is also named
Wait,
David
what?
Steffen.
What?
Right.
What?
Right.
You
Who's
know,
also has the exact same name as him, which, surprise, surprise, does not actually exist.
and he was
And
wearing my shirt.
but he was the true murderer, and that the current David Steffen was down on his hands and knees doing his job, demonstrating that their product, and then looks up to see the other David Steffen murdering Karen. So that was
Yeah.
his confession
You
to
know,
police.
I would have wanted to see the detective's face in that room of just like doing a lot of blinking. My
Well,
adopted
when I
step brother who has the same name as me.
no, adopted step twin.
What?
I was just like, what is that? And I
It's
thought
nothing.
at first I thought maybe the articles I was reading, somebody was just real not
A
smart.
moron?
I was like, what?
Does he understand what twins
Oh,
are?
I don't think he's good with the wordings.
I think he might have just threw that lie out there. Maybe he even heard it and then got darty eyed, like, can't take that back.
He couldn't even come up with a different name. He gave his his fictional adopted step twin brother his exact same name. Like
It
I
kind of
just
it kind of reminds me of that lady that I was telling you in the pharmacy that did the whole I was robbed and somebody stole all my meds and then we're like we need a police report then and then she's like I mean I spilt water in them. Like yeah so it don't make any sense.
it sure doesn't.
But I
But
feel like he
eventually,
couldn't do the whole I mean he's not my twin, he's like my twin because we have the same name. Although it also reminds me of your other case where everybody was named some variation of Anthony.
oh yeah, the Tony
Anthony,
Abels, yeah,
Tony, Tony.
Antonio.
Oh yeah, Antonio. That was it.
And then there was Tony with an I, and that was a sister. Yeah, that was crazy. But eventually, David confessed to police that, yeah, I was there alone and I killed Karen, but I didn't rape her.
I
And
tried, but
David
then things got
admitted
bloody.
David admitted that he tried to rape Karen, but he said he done couldn't do the raping because his Pepe wouldn't work.
Turns out, once she looked decapitated, it turned him off. He didn't like the pressure of time, and he had a van out waiting.
I think he didn't expect her to thrash about so much. So then I think that's when he stomped on her chest, and when she was unconscious or had the wind knocked out of her, that's when he got the knife and killed her.
Or he was not in very good shape. So after all of that, he was tired and his member was fatigued as well. Like,
Perhaps.
I didn't think this was going to be that much work. We expected
Well,
instead of stuff in a washcloth, what?
you have issues.
He has issues. He just thought he had a step adoptive half twin.
Karen's cause of death, by the way, was later determined to be exsanguination, which is bleeding to
Draining
death.
of the blood.
Yeah, as a result of severing the major blood vessels in her neck.
I know that from True Blood.
All right. And police obviously arrest David for the rape and murder of Karen. During David's trial, it was reported that semen was found in the victim's vagina, around the pubic region, and on her
What?
underwear.
Just said he didn't rape her.
Right.
Well, I guess
So
he's not the most honest individual.
the test done on the semen did not exclude David as the cum dropper. And
Ew, Andrea. That was not in any court documents.
I'm paraphrasing them court documents.
Maybe he got so excited he didn't remember.
Those tests did disclose that there was the presence of living sperm, which means if these little swimmers were still alive, it means that they had been recently dropped tadpoles. So when they
Thanks for
tested
that.
the semen in and on Karen, it was the same blood type as David Steffen. However, it's the 80s, and that's about all you get when they're confirming DNA samples was blood typing. And then there was a bruise on the inside of Karen's upper thigh, which was consistent with the use of force in a rape. There was also an unsmeared perfect drop of blood on Karen's pubic area, meaning that the rape had occurred and then the drop of blood had fallen there. Otherwise, it would have been smeared. Does that make sense? So, also at the time that Karen was found by her mom, her hair was still wet from the shower that she had just taken earlier that morning. So, the timeline of her taking a shower and being murdered and then being found was so close that her hair was still wet. And since she had just showered, it would have rinsed away all the cum sprinklings, and that means that the cream filling came after her shower.
Andrea!
Now, Karen was engaged to James, right? Her boyfriend. But they were waiting until they were married to have sex. That ruled him out as that's not his semen. So through all this investigating in the trial, David continuously kept saying, yeah, I murdered Karen, but I didn't rape her. My teeny weeny wouldn't work. I wanted to rape her. I really, really wanted to rape her, but I just couldn't get it to work. Now, all this evidence, all the testimony is left in the hands of the jury to decide. Okay, so he's admitting he murdered her. Done. That's we know that he did it.
Send him to jail for that shit. I feel like,
but
let's not
hang on.
over the rape-ins.
Hold on. The reason it's important, and you're making me jump ahead, and I knew when I put this case together, I should have moved this up there. But in Ohio, at this point in time, if you are convicted of murder and rape, and in the same act, like you raped somebody and murdered them, you can be sentenced to death. Now, if you only murdered that person, you could get life. But if you raped them and murdered them, you are facing the death penalty 100%.
I feel like that should be adopted by all the states.
I agree as well, but this is in 1983. So
yeah, but it was ahead of their times.
Exactly. So it was important to David for them to be like...
He should have gone to Florida.
Right? So it was important to David that the jury was like, yeah, you killed her, but you didn't rape her. But the jury's left to make a decision. Did he rape her? It matches his blood type.
Well, it didn't just pull itself on there.
Exactly. So who are you going to believe? Science or an admitted murderer's version of events?
I would say that ask him if it was his step-adopted twins.
Right? And on April 25th, 1983, that jury found David guilty on all charges, which were aggravated murder, aggravated rape, and aggravated burglary. So the penalty of death, like I said before, can be given in cases involving rape and murder. And wouldn't you know it, that jury of David's peers not only found him guilty of the rape and murder of Karen, but they also sentenced him to death.
Good. He does die, right?
So,
it's not one of these.
Well, he was sentenced to death. But you'd think that's where this case ends, right?
No.
Wrong.
He does have a twin.
No, he doesn't have a twin. Now we're going to fast forward to 2000. You know,
the semen doesn't match him.
When I was telling my adult son about this here case, he was doing the same thing. He's like, his dad did it. And I was like, no. Anyway, we're going to fast forward to 2007.
Somebody else in the van did it.
I'm going to ignore Claire and all her commentary now.
Although, it'd be real weird for somebody to break in, rape her, and then her be like, oh, show me how this cleaner works. And then she gets murdered. Talk about having a bad fucking day.
So, I thought maybe because her parents during the trial were saying that she was a virgin, maybe she was secretly having sex with her boyfriend. But the part that's flawed with that is she had just showered. Any of the semen that was on the outside of her body would have been washed away.
She could have just washed her hair.
Unless he's got some real sticky nut, I'm going to say it would have washed off her body. There were a few
times that you just shove your head under the faucet because you got things to do.
Okay, we're going to pretend like she has normal hygiene and just question you later when we're done recording.
She could have done like a deep conditioner in her hair Yeah, she already showered earlier, but it was like one of those had to sit in her hair. So then she just rinsed it out. But rather than get all the way back in the shower,
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you that's not what happened. So now,
you don't
shush.
know. You don't know.
I do know. I
No
do
one was
know.
in the shower with her, especially you,
I know
ma'am.
that that is
You don't know she
not
didn't
the.
deep condition her hair. You don't know how her hair got wet.
I'm sorry to our fans. Claire's a crazy person right this second.
I sure am
I can tell
not.
you that she bathed, okay? Her body was clean.
It apparently wasn't.
And if Claire will stop talking, I will finish this here case and give you some answers to some of these here questions that you're asking, okay?
I'll be the judge of
So
that.
now, like I just said, we're going to fast forward to 2007. David's attorney convinced a judge to retest the DNA evidence found in and on Karen. Because here it is nearly 3 decades later, and David's still saying, I did not rape Karen. I done only murdered her.
They should have killed him
No,
already.
right? The judge allowed the retesting, and the results came in, and shockingly, it was confirmed that this admitted murderer told the truth. His Pepe didn't work, and he did not rape Karen.
So
But
where
that
did
leaves
it
the
come
question
from?
of who did. Keep in mind, Karen had just showered before David showed up in the front yard. She was a virgin prior to this violent encounter with David,
Well,
and
and they
David left her
said,
dead on the bathroom floor. So where the hell did the
hold
semen
up.
come from?
Did they accidentally do a swab and then mix up cases?
No. When they ran the DNA test against David's and it didn't match, they put the results into their handy dandy little system, CODIS,
Mm-hmm.
which for those that have been living
Mm-hmm.
under a rock, that stands for Combined DNA Index System. And it takes time. It's not like you see on TV where they put it in and it's like, ding, we have a
Ding!
match.
Like a
Yeah,
microwave hot pocket.
exactly. So, fun fact, which I thought this was pretty interesting, DNA evidence, a single sample in a typical case takes 54 hours and 15 minutes, and each sample costs $1,180 to process. Usually in a case, there's several samples, so it's very
Yeah.
time consuming and very expensive.
That's why they don't
So,
just test all the things, they wait.
right. So they run their DNA samples through their little handy dandy computer system I told you about to find the sick son bitch. And at this point, it's now 2008, and ding ding ding, we have a winner, or more appropriately, a
A
loser.
wiener. Oh.
We do. His name is Kenneth Douglas. In 2008, Kenneth was a 54-year-old married father of 4. He was hired in 1976 by Howard County. He was an alcoholic, and he would regularly consume copious amounts of alcohol while at work. By the 1980s, he added crack to his nightly repertoire. Kenneth's wife, Pat, said that she smelled sex and alcohol on her husband when she would pick him
Ew.
up from work. Yeah, I would be pissed. And she was. She would call and report him several different times to his boss, and his supervisor reportedly told her, whatever happens on county time and on county property is county business. So stop calling. Now, you
She's
might
letting
be
him know about the businesses.
right. And you might be
Unless
asking
you're paying
yourself,
him to do some fucking, it's not a county job. That didn't fall under the job description. Unless he's fucking the
now you
boss too.
now you might be asking yourself what the hell this man has to do with our poor murder victim, Karen Range.
Because his jizz got on her somehow.
Kenneth regularly brought women in and had sex with them while he was supposed to be working to provide for his wife and 4 children. And oh, by the way, Kenneth's job, he worked nights for
You know
Howard
what?
County as a
I think
morgue attendant.
he just, ew. I think he just struggled with the phrase of working hard. So he was hard while he was working.
That's disgusting. So, sorry but not sorry. Sex in a morgue would be a no for me.
You know?
I don't know what kind of women he's bringing in that
I
they're
don't
like,
like
oh,
when the
you want to,
fan's on and I've got goosebumps.
like, that just,
And there aren't any corpses about.
it's just so gross. But I was curious what his job exactly entailed because what the hell, like, what is his job? Is he sitting behind a desk? What is he doing? No, a morgue attendant is the person who receives the bodies of deceased patients and helps place the bodies in compartment trays confirms identification of the bodies, and then
Did
releases the
they
bodies when it's appropriate.
specify? Hold up. Did they specify how he could place the corpses in those receptacles? Because he didn't need to hook them in the vagina to lift them.
So when I first read that, I was thinking because he was bringing women in and having sex with them, that maybe he sprinkled some of his
Ew.
DNA on those
Stop
tables
saying this thing sprinkled or fell or
or
like. What
splattered.
is wrong with you and your verb selections?
I like your reaction. But that's what I originally thought, was maybe he was doing
Sprinkled.
some droppings, and
No,
then the
I take it
bodies were.
as they moved in a nice looking lady and he's going, she can't refuse me.
So, but our story doesn't end there with this cheating alcoholic drug addict. By 1992, Kenneth stopped showing up to work, and his supervisors didn't find it unusual. They chalked it up to the typical government burnout and that people would just quit and not come back. And by 2007, Kenneth's DNA was on file because he done got in trouble with the police for drug trafficking. And fun fact, in Ohio, starting in 1997, that their drug trafficking offense that Kenneth was convicted of required him to provide DNA samples to put into CODIS. I know at some point it became kind of US wide. From what I gather, it was basically around 2007. If you're convicted of a crime, you have to submit a DNA sample to CODIS. At one point, it was only if you were a felon, and now it's misdemeanors or felons in certain cases. So, but Ohio was on point with their shit. Like 1997, they're
It could be why we don't have a lot of Ohio cases.
our
Indiana,
microwave.
Florida, are you listening? Hey, really, I'd say Baltimore, but no offense to you guys, you're a lost cause.
Yeah, they are.
I just had an idea. That one's your island. They're already on the coast. Just chisel
There you
them
go.
off.
Let's do it.
There's already a lot of criminals there anyway.
True. So not only did they put Kenneth's DNA into CODIS, but they also put his hiney on probation in 2008. Once his DNA sample was uploaded in that fancy smancy computer system, it done ping to that DNA sample from Karen Range. And it turns out
He's in trouble.
he didn't just bring women into the morgue for sex. He was also having sex with the fresh female corpses shortly after they were brought into the county morgue. Some, like Karen, prior to their autopsies.
If they were still warm.
In the case of Karen Range's body, she'd been brought into the morgue, and when they were waiting to do her autopsy and collect the forensic evidence off of her, Kenneth recalled opening the freezer, wheeling her remains into a back room, and he said, "I would just get on top of them and pull my pants down." And that's exactly what he did with Karen's remains. He recalled climbing on top of the young woman's body, her nearly decapitated body, and having sex with her virginal remains. So that drop of blood was her hymen breaking while he had sex with her body. It's disgusting. Like, he is so foul of, like, ugh.
Was he still married at this point?
He was. This is his wife calling and telling the supervisor, he smells like he's having sex with people.
No.
She just,
like several years later after his first drug trafficking charge, like.
So I don't want to get too distracted, but because of his shenanigans, it overshadowed like the details on David's childhood, which is why it was really hard.
Disgusting.
Because David was convicted of raping her, and it turns out it was the morgue employee that did it. And then the details on him are kind of, it's a disgusting case. But
it's a little
Judge
distracting to find out your morgue people are having sex with the bodies. Although I remember one where like a dude was doing that because it's all too common apparently. But, and he ended up getting maggots, or the girlfriend did, or some shit, because I don't know. It's really disgusting.
That's disgusting. That's so disgusting.
You know, anybody considering having sex with a corpse, that you can get an infestation of maggots. Because here's your fun fact. Maggots can eat live tissue. Most people think they'll only just eat dead tissue, but they actually like spit out like whatever in their saliva will kill live tissue, and then they eat the dead tissue. So
that's disgusting.
They don't just eat dead flesh, which I think is kind of a cool thing because they create their own food by doing that. They cook it with their spit.
I'm without words. Now, Judge William Mallory sentenced Kenneth to the maximum of 18 months for gross abuse of a corpse, with an additional 18 months because he was on probation for that there drug charge. So he ended up with two 18-month sentencings. And also in 2010, Kenneth pled guilty to sexually abusing two other female corpses. He raped the bodies of 24-year-old April Hicks, who had fallen from a high window and died due to blunt force trauma. Her death was also a
Ew.
homicide. Her attacker was acquitted during trial because they couldn't prove whether she was pushed or fell. Kenneth also admitted to having sex with a murder victim who was 23-year-old Charlene Appling. She was 6 months pregnant when she was strangled to death in October 1991 by Mark Chambers. He was convicted of voluntary manslaughter in her death. He was released on parole in 2000. But in August 2014, you're going to have to wrap your head around this one, okay? This one took me a minute to process. Kenneth would go on to admit to violating more than 100 female corpses in the time that he worked at the morgue from 1976 until he left in 1992. Pretty much any female body that came into the morgue, he had sex with.
I don't know. That's a long span of time. It's not as
That's disgusting.
It's not shocking to me. You thought he only did one or two?
100 female corpses. You would think that.
How many years
wouldn't
is
it be
that?
cold? A lot.
Well, if you break it up per year, it's not as staggering a number.
They're dead bodies. One is a lot.
I agree, but after admitting to 3, I'm not surprised you didn't shake me with that tidbit. Might as well make it 1,000.
No, ma'am.
I'm surprised. I would think that a willy would shrivel if you shoved it in a cold, dark hole.
That's what I was thinking. But by the way, it's 16 years.
But yeah, but if you do your math in, divide that by 100, what's the average per year? Then divide that by 12, what's that an average per month? It's not a staggering number.
Anyway, I think it's a lot. It's more than 100.
Right, but if you would have told me he only worked there a year and he did 100, that's an awful lot in a very short amount of time. Where 100 over 16 years, that's only 6 a year. That's him every other month.
Anyway, for those that are not as desensitized as my sister,
no,
Kenneth
I'm saying
only
it's disgusting, even if it's one. But I wasn't thinking he only had sex with 1 or 2 corpses. And if you tell me he worked there 16 years, then I'm going, yeah, that's disgusting.
Kenneth would only be sentenced to 6 years due to a lack of evidence because they can't exhume bodies. People have been cremated. Like, you can't prove it. And I also question the 100 because kind of like with the serial killers, is he claiming more than he actually had sex with because he wants the shock value, or is that legitimate?
No, so I would say, to me, it sounds like a legitimate number because if he has sex with 1 corpse every other month for 16 years, I think that's a low number for 100.
Super disgusting individual.
You know what would have been funnier, though? If they wouldn't have found, like, the feller with his adopted half-twin, that guy. If they wouldn't have been talking to him, like if he wouldn't have called about him being robbed of his shirt and his cleanings.
They would assume that he murdered her?
Yeah, if they would have done the DNA, and I realized he wasn't in at that point and they couldn't have done that. But if they would have arrested him and he would have been like, no, I just had sex with her once she came to the morgue. And they'd be like, what? You had sex with a nearly decapitated woman? Sure did. She was 1 of 100.
It's so gross. But in February of 2015, Hamilton County reached a settlement with the families of those 3 women who were raped post-mortem by Kenneth.
What?
The county agreed to pay $800,000 to each family because it turns out his supervisors were aware that he had been drinking alcohol on the job and having sex with live women inside the morgue. So
Oh,
since
I was
his
gonna
supervisors,
say, if they said they were aware of him fucking corpses and were just like, we just figured, let him play, it's disgusting.
it's so gross.
They must
And
have
there was
really had a
also,
hard time finding morgue workers.
I don't think it required a lot of education for Kenneth.
Clearly, they didn't have anybody to replace him.
So also a $2.45 million default judgment was obtained against Kenneth.
Not to keep interrupting you, however,
Mm-hmm.
that you think he never got fired initially because they were like, he is always in there diligently working.
He's always
He's
willing
in
to come
there.
in.
He's in there all hours of the night. He's willing to stay overnight to finish the jobs. In
Super
fact, he
gross.
was the employee of the month on several occasions.
Ew. Good luck to anybody collecting that 2.45 million against Kenneth, because I don't feel like he's going to ever be able to pay that.
You don't think he'll
Kenneth,
be able to earn that in prison?
so he only did 6 years. He's out.
Oh, the corpse fucker?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what job is he gonna get that's gonna pay anything that's not going to ask for some sort of background check and be like, you did what?
I don't know. But he's now 68-ish. And because I don't know when his birthday is, so he's around 68, maybe 69. He's out of jail and living a quiet. He's living a quiet life. I'm not sure where he lives or if he's divorced, but I can only assume that his wife was done with his despicable ass, because to cheat on your significant other is already wrong. But to cheat on your significant other with anyone possible, alive or dead, is a new level of what the fuck.
You think he ever told his wife she didn't need to be awake? Like, shut your peepers. We're gonna do some role playing.
Oh my god. Just lay there real stiff.
Cheryl, you moved.
Her name was Pat. And on March 31st, 2016, Judge Beth Myers resentenced David Steffen, our murderer, to life in prison without the possibility of parole, in exchange for the fact that he will no longer file appeals and he will not apply for parole. So, death sentence taken away. But at least he won't get out.
They should have killed him when they had the chance. They took too long.
They sure did. But that is the murder of Karen Range. And you didn't see it coming, though, did you? That the morgue worker left his sprinkles on her. But seriously, so the problem that I'm having, because I have another case that I'm working on where something happens after a murder, and the after effects, like this guy having sex with her with the dead bodies, it overshadows so much of the actual murder that it's so difficult to find the details on the actual murderer or the victim.
I feel like it's a good thing he admitted to the murder, because had he not, I bet he'd be out.
He sure would.
It would have been like, well, he said he didn't do any of it. And here you are, somebody else added their
sprinkles
to the mix.
The cream filling.
Stop that. You're ruining eclairs, matter of fact. And any donut or anything, cheese puffs.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change